that one's got the back infected. It's limping pretty bad on the back. It's tough to watch. I almost wonder if we're gonna have to go out there. I don't know if I can shoot that far. It's gonna be my only chance. If I wait and they keep walking, we're not gonna be able to shoot from here.
Why did you go out on this muzzleloader hunt?
For me, it was I hadn't been home to hunt, for almost 10 years. Last time I had hunted around home was 2013. I was excited, and I've always been very passionate elk hunter and always paid attention, but I didn't realize exactly how things had degraded in those 10 years. All of my old spots were just void of elk. So I came home to muzzleloader hunt and like, dang, not as much elk sign, not as much in the honey holes that they used to be. And then you realize like it's not just the elk have moved, there just aren't as many elk anymore. It was an interesting little case study because you literally, move time, 10 years, and a guy that, now has more experience and should be a better elk hunter, and I come home and just like struggle. It's just not the same.
Yeah.
And hoof rot, there's a lot of other contributing factors, but like hoof rot has to be in that conversation on, population declines.
You weren't specifically targeting an elk with hoof disease, but that's what you ended up with, right?
Yeah, and there was a little bit of me early on wanting to go find a healthy one, and then as the hunt went on, this infected herd was there, and kind of switched my plans.
What was the first shot with the muzzleloader? How far?
130 to 140. Somewhere I ranged it, and then they moved a little bit. They were kind of walking away. So he was in the back of the herd. Very, very obvious limp. Very, what looks like a painful walk. Man, hoof disease, hoof rot, whatever you want to call it. It's rough. This herd, it's the last day here of muzzleloader season. Kind of was waiting. The last day I wanted to try to find something that was healthy, but ended up just taking this bull out of a herd that's probably 70% infected. And you're going to notice like the left antler is all deformed, and we've noticed this usually if left antler is deformed, somewhere on his right side he's got hoof rot. And this bull with an obvious limp, you can see his back right hoof is kind of gone. It's rotten and it really stinks. It's kind of almost like a raw sewage smell. I wish we could figure out how to get a handle on this. Here in PL, Washington, we're kind of at the epicenter of where hoof rot started 25 years ago. Really haven't been able to get any remedies or resolution or any ideas on how to stop it, how to stop the spread. But it's devastating to see a herd of elk out here limping, just struggling to move around. It's rough. So, nope, glad to take him out of the herd. Hopefully, they say it spreads from elk to elk, so by getting some of these out, maybe we're helping, maybe we're not. I don't know.
We know it is a communicable disease. It is related to what we call hoof rot in domestic cattle. With the climb, prevalence, and national recognition of chronic wasting disease, you have this other thing that's equally as terrible, the hoof disease situation, and you just don't hear about it, but it is spreading.
Yep. Yeah, it's when as far south down the coast, Oregon, and then California has cases. It's when as far east as Idaho has confirmed cases, which is really concerning. If it's able to be transferred from elk to elk, but now it's made it all the way to Idaho, you're like, oh no, maybe we aren't going to have as good a handle on this either. It's frustrating. Nobody can tell you what you need to try to figure out. Nobody can tell you what the solution's going to be.
Yep. The reason for trying to do the late season archery hunt was really just to, as bad as it sounds, come see this hoof disease situation firsthand. Yep. We went out late season archery trying to find an elk with hoof disease, which sounds super goofy to say, but that was the goal. It is kind of weird to come into PL. There's a real tradition element of camps, opening days. I'm not seeing a ton of elk in general, but this hoof disease situation is like a very constant topic. It's obvious that the people around here are very tied to this issue.
Yeah.
Because it must just be visible.
Yeah. Everybody's involved, or they're at least aware of it around here. Probably 30 plus years ago, 30-ish plus or minus is when we first started noticing it here, and we've been beating on the drum for a long time and just didn't really seem to get much attention, or nobody, I don't want to say didn't care, but just didn't seem to get the attention we wanted it to get.
Yeah. What are our chances of seeing infected elk?
Oh, 100% this week we'll see infected elk.
Obviously, we've been talking about this for a long time. It's really piqued my interest. I want to check that out, but I've never been in the shop here. Can we check it out?
Yeah, let's go check it out.
Western Washington elk and the Phelps family are intertwined. Jason grew up in the heyday of high elk populations and easy access. His family hunting traditions fed his ambitions and literally fed the family. But that's also true for every other kid in PL. So for Jason to get better, to get more consistent and get bigger bulls while filling the freezer, he created his own elk calls, which eventually led to his passion turning into profession in 2009. As a guy who grew up around here working a state job and then split away from all that specifically to do elk calls, it's got to be pretty brutal.
Yeah, numbers are down, herd health is down. You've got some of our older guys, 60, 70-year-olds that have seen the heydays, and they're just like, I'm over it. Like,
done.
It's not worth it. It's too tough. I don't want to eat infected elk. Whatever it may be, they're just like, we're done.
Yeah.
Everybody tells us there's nothing we can do about it. Like, you're just gonna have to live with it, and I don't like that answer. And so it's while you don't want to turn your back to it, there's a little bit of that, like, well, what am I gonna do?
Well, it's finally light in the Pacific Northwest.
An hour after sunrise.
Yeah.
Finally light enough to hunt. This is a piece we got permission to hunt. There's known hoof disease elk here.
This is a spot and stock deal, right?
Yep, no calling in late season. I just feel like it puts them on too much alert.
This is a pretty representative day of growing up around here.
Yeah, it's dark and dreary, but frogs are loving it.
Yeah, that's a tree frog in December. It's a new one on me. It's wet. This is actually a very light rain compared to what we've been having, so A little over 3 inches in 24 hours here. It's a lot of moisture to disperse. I have no idea why something's on fire right now, but it is. Jason doesn't seem to be concerned about it. Got the wind in her face, and I'd say these tracks are pretty darn fresh.
Yeah,
So.
if not. And last night, this morning, so last 24 hours.
Yeah. And this rain's changing from fine rain to big fat rain. So I'm not sure what that tells the Northwest kid. Anything in particular?
Just more like normal.
Okay.
That light rain, it made me uncomfortable.
Okay, good. Pretty futile. Pretty futile. Unfortunately, we found what we were looking for. You're going to want to brace yourself for a look at hoof disease. We kind of had to guess that based on the behavior of all the other elk out here that something was wrong with this group, because they're the only group that's in the middle of a field.
Middle of the day.
In the middle of the day, yeah. You can see that hoof is, you can see like the whole kind of elf shoe. Yeah.
And then it'll get brittle and it'll start to break off. It'll be like the next progression.
Well, yeah, you can see it's broken on the left hand part of the hoof, and the right hand part is what's dangling there now. But it must be real tender because she's not wanting that thing to hit the ground.
Just holds it up. I mean, she's not. Yeah, she's holding it way up.
Yeah. Those crows have a lot of interest in her too, which is weird. That's what got her up. She would try to chase those birds off.
Maybe those crows know what's coming next. A meal.
Yeah, I'm sure they're saying, be sassy now, but we'll get you in the end.
I think there's some sense in that bird that the longer I wear this thing down, the quicker it's gonna die. That one next to her is limping too.
Ooh.
Back left. Then the calf right with him is completely, I mean, so far he's been able to
looks
dodge
totally
it.
fine,
Yeah.
but it's like, look at where they're walking and where that calf's feeding.
Yeah.
You know, and so what, they're saying obviously is like it's a communicable disease that's in the soil. That's brutal.
Yeah, it's tough to watch. She just will not put that hoof on the ground until she absolutely has to take a step.
Ah, it's such a wild deal. Elk with hoof disease die, and I hate to say it, not fast enough. Even if we took away the Sarah McLachlan-esque music, you know these animals are suffering. This is not how anyone wants to see an elk act, and for a hunter, this is a tragedy. It's a waste, it's pain, and it's an icon, a mountain monarch, reduced. It's pretty simple when you think about it. They're either in this open stuff or they're in the timber.
It's the only two places.
Yeah.
Got it dialed down to where they're at.
Yep. God, blue sky.
Yeah, beautiful.
Wild.
A little bit of a change.
Wild, yeah. It's 3-point or better, right?
Yeah. Is there more?
Yeah, there's a 4-point bullet right there. It's just like 60 yards.
Okay. Oh, did he see us?
No.
Okay.
there's a legal bull, little raggy 4-point. Must have just been laying in the sun up here. And then there's a big, looks like there's several cows on the tree line over here. It's really hard to tell what that distance is going to be. Probably 130.
Well, just like that, things can change. Up the intensity to 11, then before any appreciable action happens, dial it back down to 0.
Isn't that funny how things can seem fairly bleak, and then all of a sudden you're like, it's like an animal parade.
Yeah.
They definitely feel comfortable crossing in here.
Yeah, there's a lot of sign in here. Could you tell anything? Was he limping?
Yeah, I mean, obviously hard to say from here.
One wild thing to think about, that disease is so unsettling to see firsthand, even from 400 yards off. That there's a big part of me that doesn't want to see it up close. So I'm gonna head east to Pullman, Washington, and talk with the folks that are actually working on hoof disease. And it's gonna be real interesting to see if a lot of the anecdotal locals' perspective on this situation matches up with the biologist's perspective.
So these guys are wild elk. They were caught from the wild. So they're going to be, they're not going to be coming right up to us. They'll be a little bit wary.
I think this one knows what's going on.
Yeah. Yep, this guy, I call him the welcoming elk.
Wow.
Hey buddy, what you up to? These facilities were built about 5 years ago specifically to hold wild elk and for us to conduct the research. The reason we have the elk in captivity is we have a controlled environment. In the wild, I always say it's like you're walking in the middle of a movie. You never knew what happened to those animals for the year or 2 or 5 years before you observed them. But here in captivity, we know that they're healthy going into it. And that really makes our studies much more robust.
Have you found from your studies that hoof disease, once it sets into a herd, can contribute to an overall population decline in a herd?
I don't know enough at this point to say one way or the other. I think it depends on the location. That area that you were in southwestern Washington, yeah, high prevalence, a lot of elk that do appear to be dying that wouldn't have otherwise been dying. And then you go to other parts of the Pacific Northwest, and the disease is more sporadic. In those areas, though, for the most part, it doesn't seem to be having these population limiting effects. In southwestern Washington, I think there's much more of a question that it could be contributing.
Mm-hmm. What is it?
What is this elk hoof disease?
Yeah, what is it?
Yeah, well, this elk hoof disease is a unique disease that appears to have emerged in the early 2000s in southwestern Washington.
So not even the same family as hoof rot.
There's some of the same bacteria that are involved in foot rot are in this treponeme-associated hoof disease, but then there's extra bacteria that aren't in those basic foot rot kind of diseases. And this disease causes different lesions, and the lesions are much more severe. These are preserved hooves that we have for teaching aids. This one's split so you can see the bones inside.
That's awesome.
And you can see how close that bone is to the tip of the end of the hoof wall. So that's a normal hoof. And then we go over here, and this is a severe case of elk hoof disease. And this is the most severe case where you see the hoof capsule or the hoof wall is overgrown significantly. And then this one probably used to be overgrown like that, and it actually broke off. And the infection went all the way around the whole circumference of that claw until that hoof wall came off. And remember how close that bone is. So that elk is walking pretty much on bone when that hoof wall comes off. So you got to figure that's a really, really painful disease.
Can we see the lab side of this? Because this is probably the more enjoyable side of your job.
It most definitely is.
So can we go take a look at the other side too?
You bet.
Looking good.
So we're going to do the process following hooves through from when they're submitted, usually by hunters, to the state wildlife management agencies. The wildlife management agencies submit them to us. So what we do is we take this and we'll take it down to the diagnostic lab and do some sampling. Take some biopsies, take little chunks of skin that are then processed and looked at under the microscope by a board-certified veterinary pathologist to diagnose the disease. And then we extract the DNA from the sample. When we have extracted the DNA from the sample, we submit that for DNA sequencing. And that's when we can look at the little segments of DNA and they identify, it's like a fingerprint for different species of bacteria to know what bacteria are present.
What's the point? Are we trying to find out what it is so we can kill that bacteria in these wild herds? Are we trying to find out where it came from, or where are we at?
So right now, part of the reason we're doing the DNA sequencing is to find out what bacteria are consistently there, and then identify little target sections of that DNA that we can use as probes to develop more rapid diagnostic tests. That way, if you submitted hooves, it wouldn't take a month to get a answer back. It might only take a few days. We also are trying to just understand how the bacteria work together, which ones are the most important to be there, to understand how the disease progresses. So it allows us to be able to do more kind of epidemiological type studies at the population level, to understand how the elk and the bacteria are living together.
I get the sense that this is the beginning of hoof disease research. Like, this is the foundational moment. Is that correct?
That's exactly right, yeah. We're just trying to learn the basic information about this disease right now. But this is going to be decades of research. At this point, we're not looking for cures, unfortunately. We're just looking for ways to decrease the harm. But over time, as we learn more and more, we're building that foundational knowledge that maybe one day in the future we will be able to take more substantial actions to control the diseases.
And so if you're not a scientist or a researcher, what can somebody like me do?
Well, I think there's several things that particularly hunters can do. And the first thing is, if particularly you're hunting in an area where hoof disease is not known to occur and you get an elk, check out the feet, look between the toes, see if you see anything. If you see something odd, contact your state wildlife management agency. We need to know where the disease occurs so we know how it changes in that distribution over time. If you are hunting in an area where hoof disease is known to occur, a really good conservation thing to do is select that limping animal, take it out of the population, break that chain of infection. If you're a hunter, you can submit your hunter report. That is so important.
Just your normal hunter harvest report.
Exactly, yeah. And I can't imagine it would take longer than 5 minutes. And yet we use those data in our research. And the better those reports are, the more robust our research can be. So those are 3 things that hunters can do.
Thank you for working so hard on behalf of elk.
Yeah, yep, you bet. It's an honor.
Well, what a lot of people don't realize is the pursuit of an animal, even though it seems like it can be a selfish thing, has driven everybody that I know into becoming a way more responsible conservationist and human, really. Yeah. Where all of a sudden they do fight development in bad areas, and they do fight changes that are going to affect that awesome animal that we love to chase, right?
Right, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
We got to be thinking about the big picture.
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. Wouldn't it be great if we had a definitive answer? But how often does that happen in nature? What we can do as hunters, no matter what state you live in and hunt in, is be on the lookout for strange elk hooves and turn them in. Maybe pay a little more attention to a limping elk when glassing this spring for shed antlers and call it in. Most importantly, when you talk about elk, talk about hoof disease. The faster we learn, the more hooves we send to Dr. Wild, the faster we can help Washington elk and hopefully prevent this debilitating and fatal condition from spreading. And we're going to do that by talking about this disease. We can help hunters know what they're looking at. There are a lot more hunters in the field than wildlife professionals, and at the end of the day, it's our resource and responsibility to look after.